Okay. Is Councillor Rees going to start this off and then pass to me?
I am indeed, Professor Lindsay, if that's okay with you. So firstly, really a very warm welcome to everybody who's participating this afternoon. My name is Councillor Sarah Ruiz and I'm the Cabinet Lead for Children's Social Care and Education. And I'm sure that those on this call will understand when I say I'm absolutely delighted to be launching this commission, but there's another part of me that feels quite sad that we're actually in this position after we've not necessarily serving our children and young people with SEND very well over the last few years. So yeah, so I am absolutely delighted that we're now in this place. If I could just maybe remind people of why we have set this commission up and what we're hoping to achieve. And the local area partnership can reach a consensus on the best ways to deliver inclusion. So this is not just the council strategy, this is our strategy together. That everyone has had an opportunity to be heard and influence the future strategy, and that the partnership has a clear understanding of key issues and themes impacting residents and partners in the borough. And I think it's really important that we understand what our tasks are. And we also, you know, we are in a very different position. We have now a permanent director of education, so Anita, and we haven't been in this position probably for the last 6 or 7 years. So, you know, we are moving forward. And the recommendations of this commission will inform a new strategy for SEND and inclusion from 2022 to 2027. My goodness me, that's a long time. And we acknowledge that the current SEND system has experienced significant challenges locally and nationally. I wouldn't like you to think that if this is just a Newham issue, this is an issue right across the country. And we have a commitment to have an evidence-based practice, and we have an independent chair who all of you probably will have met. And we have a wealth of experience and knowledge of the independent chair. So, and together, all of our knowledge will help inform the strategy. So I won't say any more, but I am really looking forward to participation and probably more importantly to the end of the strategy. But you know, I hope that we can all participate, and I'm sure that we will also be learning from each other at the same time. So thank you, and I'll pass over to Professor Lindsay.
Thanks very much. Well, first of all, can I thank you for introducing and setting the scene for us. I think that's very helpful and very useful. Secondly, can I thank Newham for inviting me to join with you to move things forward in a way that I'm sure we all would want to help the young people that we're talking about here. And we've had an overview of the purpose of the commission, which, if you look at your papers, is the first section on the top of the terms of reference. So I just echo the point that this is a national issue, and it's been a long-term issue in terms of how we optimally try to support young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And then there are particular issues for any local authority, in this case Newham, of course. As I see it, to echo those points made, was that the there's an important process as well as the outcomes that we get from this. And what I've been trying to do, as you know, and I think I've met everybody here, is to engage with individuals and small groups in order to set the scene for myself, because I am outside and independent from Newham, although I have some kind of professional knowledge over the years, because I've been involved with SEND for so long, that the engagement of everyone is very important, and beyond. And we'll be hearing some things later about how we're going to engage with people within Newham, beyond professionals, but getting into parents and young people. And we've already started that, but there'll be much more to come. So a lot of this is about listening and talking and trying to develop ways forward, but within hopefully a collegial and productive way, in order to ultimately inform the strategy that Newham will then take forward. So again, can I thank everyone who's been willing to talk with me up to over the last 3 or 4 weeks. That's been extremely helpful to me, and I hope you found that useful. First of all, to know who I am, a bit about my background, and also to share concerns. And I'll come on to what's come out of those discussions in a little while as well. So the other thing, I think, in terms of us as a meeting, if everyone's willing, I tend to be very informal, and so please don't call me Professor. I'm Jeff, and if everyone's agreed, we can just talk, as many people will be doing anyway, in terms of first names, and I hope that's satisfactory. And I think I'll stop there in terms of the introduction before we go on to the terms of reference. Just check if there are any queries before we actually start on the main agenda. No? Oh, Steph.
I just wondered, Jeff, if it would be okay for us to introduce ourselves, because I know we've all met individually with yourself and many colleagues, but just conscious there may be new members of this group.
Very good idea. Thanks very much. Now, I think with Zoom, you can't assume that everyone's picture is in the same place for everybody who's looking. At least that's been my experience. It's not been very predictable. So, have you got suggestions, Steph, as to how we do this? Perhaps if we start with your screen, and then we'll just kind of move our eyes around at the arrays in front of us so that we can follow.
Brilliant. I'm happy to call out names and start this process off. Caroline, you're first on my screen. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Caroline Crompton. I'm the head teacher at Carverton Primary, and I'm the chair of the Primary Association of Newham Head Teachers.
Great. Sandy, you're next.
Hello, I'm Sandy Davies. I'm the principal of Education Links, which is the AP free school in the borough.
Great. Marcia.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Marcia, and I'm one of the SENDIAS officers. So that's the impartial support service for parents and young people with SEND.
Brilliant. Kirsten.
Yes, I'm Kirsten McLeod. I'm head of Newham Prus.
Great. Jeff, I know you've introduced yourself. Maybe you can go again.
Right. Okay. I think everyone's probably had that blurb about me, so I won't go through all that again. But basically, I'm for a long time was an educational psychologist and head of service and trained educational psychologist before going to Warwick, where I was been a professor for about 25 years. I formally retired at the end of December, and so I'm an emeritus professor still within the university. So I am independent from Newham, as I mentioned, but that's my background, and basically all my career has been based working with children, young people, and with SEND and families of them.
Thank you. Yamu?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yamu, Chair of Newham Parents Forum.
Sarah?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Wilson from East London Foundation Trust.
Great. Nikki?
Hello, everyone. I'm Nikki, Sign Language Interpreter.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Jim?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim. I'm the acting head of JFK Special School.
Thank you. Tony?
Tony Jobling, Director of Operations, Adult Social Care. And I do just need to say that I can't stay for the duration, but my colleague Cici Milona, who's Head of Service, will be attending, and then I'll be leaving later on. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. Nita?
Hi everybody, Anita Stewart, Director of Education, Inclusion and Achievement here in the London Borough of Newham.
Brilliant. Kirsty?
Hi, I'm Kirsty Reid, Early Years Lead at the London Borough of Newham.
Brilliant. Tim?
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Tim Aldridge. I'm the Corporate Director for Children and Young People Services for the Council, which means I'm responsible for children's social care and education services, including services for children with special educational needs and disabilities.
Brilliant. Michael?
Good afternoon, everyone. Michael Legister here, Comms Account Lead for CYPS.
Martin?
Hi, everybody. I'm Martin Reid. I'm Assistant Principal at Newham Sixth Form College. Most of you know it as Newvic.
Brilliant, thank you. Veronica?
Hello, Veronica Martel. I'll be taking the notes of the meetings.
Brilliant, thank you, Veronica. Paul?
Hi everybody, I'm Paul Smith. I'm Strategic Advisor Education and Inclusion working with Newham, and I'm in the role of Interim Head of Learning and Achievement as well.
Thank you, Paul. And Nasima?
Hello everyone, I'm Nasima. I'm the Head of Service for Safeguarding and Intervention, in which Children with Disabilities team sits. I'm here covering for Emma Cockrell, Director of Operations, and unfortunately I have to leave at 3 o'clock.
Thank you very much. And last but no means least, Sarah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Councillor Sarah Ruiz, and I'm the Cabinet Lead for Children, Social Care and Education.
Steph, just so you're aware, we've got a few colleagues who don't have their cameras on.
I'll just try and catch those colleagues. Let's see. I think, is there any colleagues that I have missed? Ray?
Yes. Hello there, everybody. I'm Ray Potter. I'm head teacher at Sarah Burnell School, and I'm the chair of the Newham Association of Secondary Heads. Sorry not to be joining you visually, but very much listening and looking forward to taking part.
Thank you very much, Ray. And Adiola?
Sorry, Adiola, parent rep and project lead for the 5Es. We provide services for children with special needs. Sorry, I'm driving, so I can't. That one.
No problem, Adiola. I think that may be now all colleagues. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Good. Okay. So as you'll see from the agenda, the really it's some reflections on what's happened up until this first meeting of the Commission, and then looking at the terms of reference and looking at the what came out of the discussions I've had with many of you and some others to kind of structure things and get your views on the sort of structure we're suggesting that we use for the development over these probably 6 meetings, this being the first. And there is a kind of there's a PowerPoint on the way that we're thinking of structuring the meetings in future. in terms of the sort of issues that have come up. So first of all, I think if we can look at the terms of reference and check if colleagues and everyone here is actually agreeable to those. We've heard about the purpose from Sarah, and then we've got some aims, responsibilities and functions, the principles, and there's something, a section on accountability and governance. And of course, we know what membership is. So if that's agreeable, I think if we can perhaps just go through these by section and just see if people agree with them, if I have any additions or questions, we can take them as they come up. Is that okay? Okay, so the purpose has been outlined, but you've seen it there sort of set down. Is that agreeable? Does anyone want to raise any points about the purpose of the Commission? No? Okay. Right, so if we take that as accepted. The aims, so we've got 5 aims here. If you like, I can just quickly go through them and just mention which each is, but I don't want to go through every single point in the paper, otherwise I think that would be too long. But the first one is ultimately to provide recommendations on strategies and policies to help young people and children and young people in Newham with SEND to get the best possible outcomes. Okay. Second one about young people's voices. So we want to ensure that the voices of children and young people with SEND are captured in this Commission's exercise, and that their voices are taken notice of, not simply being kind of collected, and that they are represented then in the ultimate outcomes of this Commission. Okay. Third one is to, as you've seen, the Commission is very broad of partners and experts, including parents and indeed the young people themselves, and the schools, Commission partners and specific expertise and interest in children and young people with SEND. So the issue there is clearly broad representation and engagement, I think, is important in that. Okay. The fourth is to add value by positively engaging stakeholders in early debate and discussions around the issue. So as you'll see in a while, we'll be looking at activities between these Commission meetings in terms of engaging with a range of people that I've mentioned, to get an even greater extent of views. And perhaps if I add that one of the things that I'm assuming and hoping for is that everybody here has networks of colleagues or friends or other parents, for example, to share and to encourage people to engage as well, so that everyone is hopefully representing and also disseminating the discussions and adding other voices to the discussions, which can funnel back in through each of us into this Commission's discussions. Okay. And the last one is ultimately to agree a set of high-level outcomes. We're not looking at details here of very specific issues, because I think that's a matter for the strategy to actually come up with very specific actions and action plans and so on. But the set of high-level outcomes for all children and young people with SEND in Newham to be achieved ultimately through the revised strategy. Okay. So does anyone want to question any of those or add anything to them, or are we happy just to use those as our framework? Fine.
Could I
as we
just,
go on.
sorry, Jeff, could I just come in?
Sorry, Sandy. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I know it's difficult to see everybody on the screen, isn't it? I'm interested to note that nowhere in this document are we referring to data, but in the second line of the purpose, it's talking about collecting and analysing local and national evidence. And I feel that there needs to be some connect between what that evidence is and you know, whether we're drawing baselines, we're using what already exists, and if the outcomes are going to achieve what we want them to achieve, we need to be able to measure that impact. And so it feels either in the aims or perhaps in one of the other sections, data needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, good point. I can say that when we get on to the particular foci of each meeting, one of the areas we'd be looking at is data, in terms of the sort of data which is produced nationally by the DFE, for example. And I know some people have seen this through the board meetings and so on, through the head teachers meetings. But your point is very well made. It won't surprise you, being in the role I am in as a researcher, that data is absolutely fundamental to this. So thank you for raising that, Sandy. We'll check on that. Okay, any other points? I should be looking at hands, shouldn't I? Instead, I know that's one of the things that you can do. But no, I think it's easier if people just raise their hands if there is anything, because that's as Sandy did. No, okay, so if that's all right, we'll use that. But as I say, as we move on, there may be other things which people want to make sure that we're also, you know, covering. It's always difficult when you have a whole set of these sorts of statements, then suddenly afterwards you think perhaps we've missed something. So we can be a bit flexible on that. So thanks, Andy. And so that we'll move on from the aims and the responsibilities and functions. So rather than go through them all, can I just check if anyone, as everyone's had a chance to have a look at them, does anyone see anything, first of all, anything that doesn't look right and shouldn't be there? And then secondly, anything that perhaps, as we've just heard, is not evidently going to be part of the responsibilities and functions, and someone wants to raise? No? Okay. Okay, fine, thank you for that. Then turning over, we have some principles. I think I will just read these, because I think these are the sort of more, can be somewhat sort of nebulous if we're not careful, but ultimately these principles are important, I think, and people may want to identify others to guide our practice in this commission. So I think the first, to make the point that we recognise that there's good practice taking place across Newham, and the data issue, we know that from some, but we know that there are difficulties. Still too many children and young people who are not achieving positive outcomes, or as positive as perhaps they should and have a right to expect, within the current framework of support. In order to support a strategic partnership approach to improvement, the Commission must hold these principles. That's a suggestion for you to agree with or challenge. So the first is transparency, to act with transparency, promoting our findings regularly and ensuring engagement is accessible. I've mentioned that, and there'll be some further explanations about that, about how that can be done. Is that okay? Second is on trust. Build trust by promoting fairness and equity of provision and resources. Thirdly, to focus on effectiveness and impact, including cost effectiveness. Not exclusively, but that as an important dimension. And the last one here is to work collaboratively and systemically to reach solutions based on the best interests of children and young people with SEND in Newham. So those are principles which we've felt, and I must say I've had direct input into what those principles are, ones that I would want to have always worked on. So are we agreed to those? Or any? Okay, fine. And then there's a section on accountability and governance. So I think that's sort of more for information about how we're going to operate. But I think the notion of accountability, as I've said, links in also to linking with other people who are not in this room, so to speak, in terms of sharing information and getting other people's opinions. So we go beyond just the people in this room. Important though everybody is and very knowledgeable, but also to be able to inform our discussions more widely. As we'll come on to, there's processes that we're going to use to make sure we get lots of people engaged. Okay, so that's the sort of mechanics of how we're going to do it, and the frequency, roughly every 4 to 6 weeks. We were put back a little bit because of PERDA, so we've got 3 meetings this term, and then just 3, isn't it? I think 3 meetings, and then 3 in the autumn. Was it 3 or is it 2 or 3, Steph? I've forgotten, in the autumn.
We've got 2 main meetings, and then we've got an extra one in case there's an area we want to explore in more detail.
Yes, yeah, okay. So that's the idea, and we've got the way it's going to operate in terms of having notes and having recordings and having dissemination that parents and others can see beyond those actually here. Okay, so is that all right? Anybody got any other points to raise on that? No? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so this is the third item, which is the findings from the lines of inquiry. So just to remind everyone, because not everyone, I haven't met absolutely everybody, the idea here was to meet with a wide range of people, including parents and young people, as I said, and across services, in order to start the thing off and to identify themes which were of concern across the wide range of stakeholders represented here. And what I've done is to summarize, and these aren't exclusive. I mean, there are other points that have been made by colleagues into this 3 pages and a couple of lines list. I'm not going to go through all those. That's really the background to show you, I think, first of all, just how many issues have come up. Many of them are pertinent and particular to different people and different groups, but there are a number which are can be clustered together. A number of people from different bits of the system, and people from outside it, like the parents and the young people, have raised. So in the next bit, which is where I want to focus on particularly, we are looking at how we would we're proposing we organise our discussions of those issues. But I wanted to show you my analysis of the range of topics, of issues like working with parents, early intervention, and then a series of points which have come out of specific discussions with different people. So first of all, can I just ask, I'm not planning to go through this long list, but if anyone's got any comments about that process, and if you found it helpful, those of you who have been involved in it, but also what's come out of it, just general views before we go to look on the way that we're planning to kind of consider these, and we've clustered them, as I say, as into 4 major groupings. So any general points? Steph?
Just, I guess, the breadth of colleagues that you met with, Jeff. So I think just to let other members know that there were about 50 colleagues and young people and parents that were engaged in this kind of key lines of inquiry exercise. So we have, you know, hopefully caught the kind of depth of views from this, but obviously we'll be going in and looking in much more detail at specific areas that have come up multiple times. But I just thought it was good to stress that was quite a significant number of people that were involved in this.
Yeah, thank you, Steph.
Hi, sorry, it's Kirsty. I don't know if you can see my hand. I put a comment in the chat, just asking, because the report kind of says issues, and I'm wondering if we are going to build upon some good practice, because there is some real elements of good practice that I suppose I don't like the deficit language of issues, because actually there is some really good examples that we could build upon. And obviously in the early years discussion, there were some examples of that, and I'm just wondering how we're going to use and celebrate good practice and what we know works well in Newham and how we build upon it, rather than just focus on the issues. I just that sits a bit more comfortably for me, and that's how we bring everyone together. So I'm just wondering if that's been thought about at all.
Well, I'm going to throw that open, but can I just make the point that I agree entirely. And in fact, if you look at the very first issue, it's the benefits of working collaboratively. So there's not many positives put in here, but actually I totally agree, personally totally agree with your point. And that is certainly the intention, that we would want to see good practice and something which will take is a positive as well as negative. And also they're called issues rather than problems or challenges or anything like that. Again, to reflect that, but I agree that most of them are probably more easily interpretable as a problem or something, but that's not the intention. So thanks, Kirsty, that's a very important point. So any other comments? No? Okay.
I think,
sorry, Anita, please.
Just to sort of say, I think I agree with what Kirsty was saying, because we're not necessarily building something from scratch here or a blank piece of paper. So I'm really just echoing that, and I'm hoping that as we move through the commission, but also from your conversations that you've had, Jeff, that certainly in that recommendations, there'll be an opportunity to really highlight some of those things that are already working well to building. So it's just echoing what Kirsty said there, but we know there are areas of things that are working really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Right. There was one issue that I wanted to raise with you, and I think it's probably as well here, which is the engagement of young people. It's something which I know Tim and Anita are very, and everyone I think sees as very important. We've got it written in. It's a question of how best to make it work. And one of the things that I'm very keen on is that we do engage young people, at least in part, in ways which they feel most comfortable in, which may not be sitting in a Zoom with 20 to 30 faces looking at them. And certainly I would be very keen, and we are planning this, is to organize events which are designed to help young people to make themselves heard, get their voices heard. And we have had discussions about whether to include a young person or a couple of young people on the commission. because that's a clear possibility to think that would be helpful. But as I say, it may not be the most useful way for the young people to express themselves. And so at the moment, we haven't got anybody on this group at the moment. And so I wanted to raise that with you and explain what the rationale is of how we want to make sure the most useful information that they want to express, those who we can engage, can take place. But as I say, I think it's important that the Commission appreciates that and has will be interested in people's views.
Sorry, as a
Anita?
parent rep.
Oh, sorry.
Adiola here?
Adiola?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as a
sorry.
parent rep, which is what we highlighted before in previous meetings, that half of our children are already in schools, for example, and they're readily available. So I think it would be, we said that would be a good idea to go from that angle, first of all, because for some young children, which you said in one of the meetings before, it might be overwhelming for them to come onto this kind of a place. And right now, the young people are saying, you know what, if we do come, what is the outcome? So we need to be very clear on how are we doing it with them. So, and even we've got the youth zones too, we've got places already. And we also mentioned that we should not forget about the children who are schooling outside the borough and find ways of communicating with them. So really and truly, starting from the schools, the colleges, and whatever it is, wherever the children are at, we can get it to them.
Thanks very much. Very helpful. Yes. Sandy?
Thanks. I'm mindful that there's been quite a lot of surveys and different ways of canvassing young people's opinion on issues, certainly throughout the last year, what with COVID, and also with the development of the youth zones and other parts of the Brighter Futures programme. So on the one hand, I'm thinking there may already be some information that is pertinent that could be used. But I think if we're going out to young people again, to make sure that it's not the same young people as might have already participated, because they're the ones who perhaps are ready to put their hand up and join in. And then to be very clear about what it is we're asking of them, so that we do get information that is pertinent and doesn't waste their time, but then we can show that there is some positive impact of what they're telling us. Certainly going to the schools is an obvious route. And also I'm very mindful, because in my setting, and I'm sure Kirsten is aware of that at the Proofs, there are young people who are just not in school. And so maybe their voice is actually quite important as well, because they will have a very particular experience of services.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Anita?
Jeff, I know there was a session this week with some young people as part of kind of the initial engagement, and I was wondering if there had been, what their views were about how they should be involved, or is that a question we still need to ask?
I didn't ask them that specifically. I was really asking, I focused on their experiences of what they wanted to express about, and they did. Some of it was, I must admit, quite worrying in terms of concerns that, of their experiences. But no, I didn't ask them specifically, because they were only the three. There's only three, and they're the only ones I've seen. So, I wanted to kind of bring it to this commission first, because I think it's an important decision on how to move forward. Either you have young people here, or you'd find another way, or you do both, I think, and that's something I wanted to share. My own view is that the involvement of young people is important and essential, but it has to be workable. It has to be something which they feel comfortable with and can express themselves, not kind of be tokenistic. I know that sounds very negative, but I think everyone knows what I mean. What I'm distinguishing there. So so thanks, Jim.
Oh yeah, I think we also need to think creatively about how we give voice to those individuals who may not find it as easy to participate and give their feedback.
Yeah.
And that we may need to be creative in the ways in which we endeavour to do that.
Yeah. 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 Thanks, Jim. Yeah. Kirsty?
Yeah, similar to Jim, I was able to say also for early years children, so thinking creatively. So as part of the early years conference, we were able to make some do some filming about what a child may do in a setting and stuff. But I think we have to be really creative, because again, it can't just be for the older young people who have a voice. It needs to be for very small children and for young people that don't have a voice or can't articulate how they're feeling. So I think there may be some good practice examples in early years, again, about how we've been able to capture the voice or work with our partners to try and get a bit of a story for that young person. But I'm just really aware of some of this, that the early years voices and small children are sometimes missed out. So I'll be keen to make sure that's included.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. Okay, any other points? Sarah?
I don't know whether there's a way of doing some kind of hybrid approach where we I know sometimes with child mental health we might get service users themselves to do some interviews and some films, and maybe kind of bring together people's views in that way. So maybe there's a scope to think about doing something like that for some of the older kids anyway.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Well, can I suggest then that what I think is coming across is the importance of the points I was making of trying to engage people productively, young people, even very young people, little children, as well as parents, which again is obviously very important. And I think what's coming out also is the idea of engaging beyond this group. So within schools, within different groupings, there's scope for actually quite a lot of engagement by colleagues to help the young people and the children, so that the children and young people are working with people they know in a way which they can then express some views, and it can be structured in a way which helps them express themselves, rather than, it was okay with the young people I met because they were older, they were secondary, and after a bit of warm up, they were okay. But a lot of young people, as we heard, either for all sorts of reasons, will find communication difficult. So would it be agreeable that, and this would require a whole range of people to kind of, stimulate their colleagues and so on, to see if they can engage young people in this discussion. We'd have to think about structuring it and supporting it and so on, but I think that's what's coming through. Is that a fair point? Okay, so if we go away and think about that and come back to you, I'll use you collectively. I don't want to kind of pick on particular people or anything like that, just to see how we actually implement it in that way. But I think it's the principle that we've agreed to: involvement, engagement, but actually meaningful as well. Okay, thanks very much. If we go now to this, the PowerPoint, where we're looking at the ways forward. Is that okay? Unless there's anything else beforehand. Steph, I think you're going to sort out the system so we can all see this. Shall I pass over to you now, Steph, and then we'll go through that. Okay, so, right. So, as I mentioned, these slides are a kind of condensation of the much larger group of issues that I put in that document that we've just looked at. Steph has very kindly clustered them together into 4 groups. So if you come to the next slide, please, Steph. This is just to remind you what we've been saying, so I'll just skip quickly over this. So we've had these one-to-one interviews over this period. Actually, they've gone a little bit before. I had some like this week, and I think there's a small number of people who I'm still going to hopefully have a chance to discuss with. Hasn't been possible up to now with people that we've added. This is the launch, the 3rd one. And now we're into what we're calling the open evidence gathering sessions ahead of each commission meeting. And we've got, we'll come on to that later, we've got a draft plan of meetings of when each one, what they would be and when they would be. We've got our own commission meetings, and then finally we'll come to this report at the end of the commission's work. Steph, can we move the next one, please? Okay, so as Steph mentioned, I met with probably now about 50 stakeholders, young people and professionals, parents, and the rest I think is self-evident. We've discussed that. So if we go on to the first of the meetings. So this is, oh, actually, I suppose I should just quickly go through them so that you have an overview, and then I'll come back, Steph, if we can, to this one, the first one, the on identification of needs. So if you go back to the first set of bubbles. That's right. So this is the first one. So we've organised them. There is a rationale behind the organisation of the topics, but so the first one is going to be on identification of need and early intervention. Steph, can you just go on to the next one, please? And that would be followed by the voice of children, young people and families. And then the third will be the whole issue of statutory assessment and support. And then the fourth one will be funding and provision. And just to mention, just part of the rationale is that we thought that with the work going on and behind needs budget and so on, and the having discussed other sorts of issues, the funding and provision main topic, key theme should be, probably comes best at the end. And we've tried to sort of organise them in that way. So if we go back, Steph, to number 1. Okay, so this would be the first theme, i.e. this will be the focus of the next meeting of the Commission. And also just to make the point that I'm sure we're all aware that these themes they're overlapping. We've got an overlapping. We're not making it more complicated than it is at the moment, but these do overlap. And these 4 themes are just a way of discussing, because clearly there's going to be issues in this one which will come up in the others and so on. But this is just a way of organising it. So again, if we look at these, and we'll see what colleagues' thoughts are on this cluster that we're thinking of, any things that you think that might be helpful in here. And some of them may appear later. I don't think that matters. I think it's whether if you see a way of you think might improve what we're focusing on in this first session. Obviously, we don't want lots and lots. We've got to try and focus our thinking in the time that we're having a meeting. But this is the 6 sort of topics that we've put in this one here. So if I just go through them and ask you your comments. So we start at the top with ordinarily available support in education as a topic, going round to the right. So the issue of early intervention, early identification and then intervention throughout, and the concept of early intervention that we're using here is not just by age, it's not just about young children, it's about also early intervention in a young person's life as they develop and at different stages. So for example, the beginning of adolescence, etc. Then the third is the development of provision within the local offer and the nature of the local offer. As you'll see from the extended list, there's the issues about the local offer that came up. And then monitoring of progress and outcomes pre-statutory support. And what I'm thinking of here is the system and the way that we support young people, not just kind of focusing on education, health and care plans, but what happens before that in and where the local offer links in with that. Also social inclusion, not just educational attainment, for example, but social inclusion. And then the use of this is a particular interest of me, the use of diagnostic versus needs models of assessment and the impacts of the model that you use on provision. And what I'm thinking of here is what happens if we focus on whether a young person can be categorized as having a certain disability or category of need, as opposed to focusing on the needs that that young person has, the severity, the permanence or changeability of them, etc. So that's an overview. Can I just open this out now to see what people feel about this? There's the first meeting's focus and the sub-foci. Now, Steph, I now can only see, there we go. Thanks. Sandy, I think you've got your name up, your hand up, sorry. Yes, thank you, Sandy.
So I'm looking at the first three bubbles really, although they are again all interlinked, but the support that's ordinarily available, the universal support, early intervention, and developing a provision, sort of a map, I presume, through within a local offer. That's what we'll be looking at, and I would hope that we would be looking for the pathways through that system, and also the thresholds of need and intervention. Not something that needs to be said here, but when we come to look at the detail, that would be part of it, because that could be quite complex for some individuals.
Yep. Yep, thank you. Kirsty?
Yeah, I was going to echo Sandy actually, and then add, especially around the early identification. So when we look at, we know what works well. Parent feedback is we're kind of clear for the 0 to 5 single point of access, but what is the single point of access for over 5s? So I think that how we identify early, what does that identification look like? Because there's so many case reviews where we see there was kind of behaviours and points that were missed. Yep. So I think that is a really, as Sandy said, I think that's where lots of feedback has been, we kind of failed to see the signs early enough. And then the other bit, so you kind of got social inclusion, but I just feel like if you think about inclusion in Newham and what that means and the disproportionality in Newham, I'm just wondering whether the social inclusion will include all of that, especially around disproportionality, which we know has a big impact for children in Newham as well. Will it be picked up there, or do we need another bubble?
Well, I think you put your finger on one of the problems of trying to put things into bubbles in 2 dimensions as well, because of course these are multi-dimensional. And for example, the issue of disproportionality, you could say, and there's a number of them, will go through probably every bubble in some way. And I think your point is good, and thanks for making it. And I'm not suggesting people don't make these points, even if that's the case, because we just need to be completely, constantly aware of this. So it isn't that, and so, for example, and another sort of point is the question of transition, you know, from say preschool, early years to infant and so on. So that point is very well made. I'm not sure I think we'll be discussing some of these more than once, I'm sure. So thanks for making that. Marcia?
Yeah, hi. I'm just kind of going on what Sandy and Kirsty saying around the diagnosis and late diagnosis, because what I find with my work is that lots of children and sometimes young people end up on this other side of into exclusion and permanent. And what we're finding, some of those young people have got needs, or and some have been diagnosed after that time of being excluded. So I'm just kind of echoing that kind of thing of, that early intervention of diagnosis and parents not really understanding the process.
Yeah.
And what that looks like, and then find themselves in, having their child being permanently excluded from school and not really knowing how to communicate what's happened and the earlier steps of these behaviors, which is a form of communication, what was happening. So I'm just kind of echoing that. And there's also that intersectionality about cultures and groups. I don't really see that, and I think that's really important to put in there. The disproportion of some people maybe being missed for various reasons, maybe conscious or unconscious biases. So I'm just putting it there, but I'm just saying, in my experience as being in CENDIAS, there's some real concerns around that kind of work.
Yeah, thanks very much, Marcia. Yeah, again, I think it's another one of these cross-cutting themes, isn't it, that you're mentioning as well. Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Anita. Oh, you weren't watching. Sorry, you lit up there. So when I see somebody light up, apart from myself, I think I'll go to them. Anyone else want to make a point? No.
Hi, I'm not sure if this fits in, Adiola, based on what
Adiola. Yes, sorry, Adiola. Yeah.
What they've just said. This fact that, because everybody said about early help seems to be doing things well so far, but the question is, it seems there's a lack of joined up thing there, whereby things have been noticed, like Marcia was saying, but how come it's been missed? Because when they come to that section, like she said, when they go to the PRU or wherever they go to, it's there that their things have been highlighted in behavior and different things. But how come within the services, there seems to be no joined up service of how you report and move things ahead? So looking in that side of things, really, that's another one for most children, families.
Okay, so joined up thinking across the system, really, isn't it? Yeah, okay, thanks very much. That's really helpful. Caroline.
Hi, I'm just looking through the other bubbles and I'm just thinking about communication. And actually it probably fits in better with this theme than the others.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of how things are either trained within organizations, or how parents are communicated with, or how parents get information. So I think just a general theme of communication. And also, I know we've got conversations about the local offer, but again, how the borough communicates. So I just don't know where communication as an individual little bubble might fit into all of these bubbles.
No. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very important communication issue. I think it's cross-cutting all through many of these. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Is there anybody else? Sandy, and then Sarah, I think, to follow. Yeah, Sandy first, then Sarah.
Yeah, sorry, it was just following on from those last comments, that in joining up the approach, I'm very aware of the mobility of people in Newham, and young people who you start to work with and they're moved on. So there can be housing issues, as well as those who are newly arrived in the country or moving from other parts of the UK. I've no idea, I've no sense of how big a problem that is, but amongst head teacher colleagues, I hear it quite often. And I know that people who are in unsettled housing situations, that can be a real barrier to them getting the SEN services they need. So again, maybe that comes through in one of the bubbles, not a bubble on its own, but I think that would certainly contribute to the joined up approach, because housing issues impact on on my work in alternative provision quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's great. Sarah?
It's sort of what somebody was saying earlier about a kind of three-dimensional approach. I was just thinking about the language, about how we're communicating and how we're kind of building trust, I guess, between services, between families, between young people, and just kind of how we're doing it together. So I think it is so complicated, as is the you look at the bubbles, shows how complicated it is. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Jim.
Sort of been touching on lots of comments that have come before. I think it's about the connectivity of all of the different services involved, both local authority services and other stakeholder parties, and really how we seek to determine a strategy that accounts for sometimes competing demands and competing priorities, and how we can best ensure that those don't impact negatively ultimately on the young people. So how we can establish a route forward that removes some of those barriers or reduces those.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Any others? One that strikes me, which is talking about the mobility actually in a different way, but actually thinking of young people in care and when they move about, and sometimes I know get lost in the system somehow. So it's a different form of mobility, but a very important one for the young people concerned. Yeah. Okay. All right. So should we go on to the next one then? So we've done that. If we go on to the voice of children, young people and families. So if I just quickly go through them, going the same way clockwise. So individual service level and strategic co-production with young people. So engagement with them in a productive way. Developing an alliance of parent carers representatives. The third one is the issue of exclusion by default, I've called it here, where there's a lack of appropriate provision, where by default, there's a sort of an unintended exclusion from provision, as well as the more normal kind of understood exclusions. The quality of information, advice and guidance. So that links in with the communication point that's been made, but slightly different way of expressing it. The preparation for adulthood, education, employment and training opportunities. So again, that links into the transition question. And a point about inclusion, the moving away from a focus on placements as being a sign of inclusion towards a conceptualization, which is actually pretty common now, of a much broader notion of what we mean by inclusion, to include accessible curriculum, personalization of children, of the teaching, the pedagogy, etc. So it kind of links to what we mean by inclusion, inclusive education, in order to and including the voices of young people and giving them voice as part of an inclusive system. So there's a group there. Should we go back to discussing that, Steph, if we get the so comments on that bubble or set of bubbles?
I'm happy to say something.
Yeah, please, Bastien.
I think I did mention this, I think Tuesday also, around that the preparation for adulthood. There seems to be gaps there. I know there are young people that I work with in terms of about independence and options and choices around careers. They've not had any really clear individual, authentically to them, and they don't understand what their next steps are, and that's happening in lots of places across schools and colleges. So that's a real concern. I feel that they don't have a clear kind of the guidance aspects is not really there. So I just wanted to raise that. And again, I mentioned about the exclusion. There's lots of that, especially as the young people are getting older, there's lots of exclusions. I'm working with parents where children have been excluded around behaviour. It's really worrying for me as somebody supporting parents, and parents are very worried about what that means for their child. So these things around and not having clear aspirational goals to reach their potential prior to that, this all thing I think interlinks.
Yeah, thanks very much. Caroline.
It kind of follows on a little bit from what Marcia said, and we have already spoken about it, but I think this is the point to reiterate it again. I think we've got a duty as a commission to make sure that we do try at some point to reach out to those people who've, and I'm trying to keep Kirsty's point about trying to stay positive and not look at the negatives, but I do think we've got a duty to look at those children who have been missed in the system, and whether they are looked after children or whether they're children who have been excluded or who have had a very late diagnosis. I think we've got to try and have some conversations with some of those young people, because I think, you know, when I've been involved in some of those cases, when I've looked back, I've been kind of frustrated with there were gaps and nobody's ever really sat through and looked through what those gaps were. So I just really think that we've got a duty, and how we do that, I don't know. I did put in the chat before, Jeff, that I think schools, we've captured children here. You know, you can come, we can give us a set of questions, we'll get a child in front of a camera, we'll film them answering the questions, heavens knows what they'll say, but that could be a set of talking heads that then we put into an area that you can all look at and review, and that, you know, give us a genuine impression of what those children think. But I think the questions have to be set and be quite clear and thought through.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's very good. Kirsty.
I think Martin was first, and then I'll come back in.
Sorry,
It's okay.
Good of you to come to a fellow read, Kirsty. Thank you very much. Even the same spelling. No, I mean, it very much follows on from a couple of the points. And I mean, it's interesting, given this whole theme is about voice, that that's where this is really coming through. But I think we, in a sense, what we need to focus on here is the stories that our children and young people tell us, and it rather takes Kirsty's point about us not being positive or negative here, but that we give an opportunity to frame a narrative, so that when we're speaking to a group of young people, we can gather a kind of rich set of data. Because I think what we all know is we've got young people who we can say who've been failed and will have a terribly negative story to tell, and then there's other young people who actually don't have that, or even young people who might have been failed and have then subsequently had some positive things to tell us. And we need to understand that whole narrative to really get to the bottom of what is going on in our community, and how what's working and what isn't. So I think there is an opportunity here for a kind of narrative frame that perhaps, as Caroline says, we can take out to schools, colleges and what have you, and use as a way of hearing what those young people have got to tell us about their experiences.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, and I think again what your points about both the negative issues that people want to raise as well as the positive, but trying to make sure we do get positives as well as the negatives, because both are potentially very informative, aren't they? You know, to help us move forward. Kirsten.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to go to Kirsty.
You're going to Kirsty first. This is brilliant. Read, Kirsty.
Kirsten. Yeah, I think it was just the point about the wider community. So we've kind of got children, families, and I just think that, so if you think about kind of peer facilitator programs that we've got, parent kind of champion support, the work that Marcia was talking about, I just think it's about how we draw upon the wider community groups, faith leaders, our voluntary organisations that actually work really closely with some of our families, and they may also engage more with the less engaged families. So I think it's just going into schools and doing that, there's still the cohort of children, but it's about those others that aren't really seeing many professionals that I just think we keep needing to go back to. So how we pull upon our wider community to reach out to those less engaged, I think would be helpful.
Okay, thanks very much. And now Kirsten.
Okay, I'm not sure how well I might articulate this because it's kind of forming in my head, but it's something around the bubble, which is exclusion by default, where there's a lack of appropriate provision, to the placement focus versus a wider conceptualization, and it's very much around the association with exclusion and the stigma of exclusion, and very interesting conversations with our students yesterday around actually their happiness at actually being in the setting, but yet when they leave the school, they will turn their fleeces inside out so that they haven't got the association of being at a PRU and being Tammosh, and that what that exclusion has actually meant. And it goes back to that whole conversation that we do know that the majority of these young people are coming with unrecognized, unmet learning needs, and it may be that it's about the curriculum and the personalization of teaching and the pedagogy that is the critical element of it. It's in responding to their behaviors, communication. And I do think that we have to kind of really tackle this understanding of exclusion and placement versus the curriculum and the personalization element.
Okay, thanks so much, Kirsten. Okay. Oh, Tim, were you going? Sorry, Tim, you've disappeared. Sorry, Tim, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, perhaps part of this theme is also understanding what a model of co-production could look like moving forward. So, recognizing some of the challenges and issues, if we like, about ensuring we've got the voice of young people and their families, but also how would effective co-production be part of service delivery moving forwards.
Yeah, thanks very much. Great, that's well, thanks again for all those. So if we go on to the third one. Okay, so this is generally about, and of course some of these points have come up, but it doesn't matter, statutory assessment and support. So again, going around them quickly, local area view, understanding of demand, the overall system, the time, efficiency, quality, workforce development, all those factors in ensuring the system operates effectively. Specific point about tribunals and the potential and actual impact of tribunals on wider service capacity, particularly obviously after decisions of the tribunals, but I gather this is one of the positives for Newham in terms of the way it's been dealing with we're going to tribunals and doing it sort of positively, I think, as I've heard so far. Opportunities for informal assessment and support, and this goes back to that point about early intervention before you get to, say, the statutory assessments. What kind of, I'm calling them informal, I don't mean sort of loose, I mean ones which are not in the statutory basis of going into a education, health and care plan assessment, but other sorts of assessments and support predate those. The impact, this is again a very specific issue about the way that speech and language therapy, as I understand it, has kind of two bases, if I can say, call it that, two elements to it, and the degree to which that is helpful or is problematic, and the impact of plans on outcomes. I mean, obviously education, health and care plans are intended to produce positive improvements in the young person's development and the outcomes from that. So that's another theme that's linked in to this overall major theme of statutory assessment and support. Okay, so again, let's any comments on that? Any changes? Sarah?
think I'd take the speech and language therapy one further, and rather than saying the impact of having two, I think I'd say the impact of not having an integrated service.
Fine. Okay, good. Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. But something specifically on the involvement and the engagement of the speech and language therapy input, and working with the education, working with teachers, for example, to develop joint programs or joint.
It's the system. It's absolutely the system. But I would say that where we're starting from is not great, and I think we've, many people would recognise that. So it's sort of, let's not go through that again, but let's identify what we're going to do about it and how we're going to use the whole system, support the whole system more effectively.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, Caroline.
Sorry, Marcia.
Oh, sorry, it's Marcia.
No, it's okay. I'm on now. I'm
yeah.
curious to know, Jeff, how the speech and language came up as such a strong individual service issue, when I'm kind of conscious of OT issues, of kind of CAMS issues, of following on what Sarah said about integrated. So it's kind of, I'm pleased it's there, but I'm kind of surprised it's been picked on. Did that come up as a common theme for you when you were talking to?
No. This, when I did this, I tried to put as many different issues that came out. Speech and language therapy, I think, came up 2 or 3 times. And it wasn't a big issue. These are not all equivalent issues. These are kind of indicators within something that's can be coherent, if you look, relatively coherent. So yes. I don't think there was much reference to concerns about OT, for example, or physio. I mean, it came up, yeah, it did came up. So you're quite right. Perhaps I should have put that in as well. So
maybe we just change that one to services then, as opposed to.
Yes, yeah, it's services. I mean, educational psychology is another issue as well. So you will find some more somewhere in there. But apologies for that. But so yeah, good point. I think Kirsty was next. Yeah, okay, Kirsty.
Yeah, I think it was just about the assessment section. So I know you referred to it in an earlier slide, but so for early years, there's multiple assessments. It's about how do we align assessments that take place. And when it's kind of statutory, yes, there's the EHCP, but that very early identification that you focused on, I just think about how are we making sure that there's a very clear tool of assessments or ways that capture people, the way people capture it, so that it's a way that we all do it consistently. And I think that to me is a big issue. And then linked to that, just to give an example, so with the early years reforms, GLD won't be moderated, and that's a key indicator that we look at to say, look, what is the good level of development of children against their peers, and that kind of data is going. So I do think we need to do some work about aligning assessments and how we monitor. Do we really know locally that things are making the difference, and how we're assessing children? Because there are just some things that are changing in that space at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much. Any others? Okay, so if we just go on to the sorry, Sandy. Yeah, right.
And I've seen Adiola's hands up as well. I just wanted to pick up on the one of opportunities for informal assessment and support, which at time can be of high quality, but is often a response to the challenge of the lack of integrated services. And when that informal assessment and support is not of high quality, how are we seeing that? How are we monitoring that? And should there be some Q&A of something that is below the threshold of statutory assessment and support?
Yeah. I think that's partly what I was getting at. But it's not like things sort of potter along and then suddenly go into statutory assessment. It's all of that. It's a pathway issue again, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks very much, Sandy. Now, Adiola, sorry, I've just noticed your yellow hand up there. Which I've not been. I've not been picking up. I don't know if I've missed other people, but Adiola, you, please.
That's all right. It's just, I mean, in line with what has been said earlier, especially the fact that when you have, yes, I mean, in the true model, Newham, when we didn't have EHCP plans, for example, there was this sense of inclusion, but it wasn't really there. But even now that you're saying we're having EHCP plans, the question still comes to parents, how is it being quality assured, number one? Number two, in these plans where you have education, healthcare, and all of that in there, sometimes for some in the health side, it says no healthcare needs. That's in line with you saying, I mean, for example, now you don't have like speech and language and things that should be in there. When it comes to OT, for example, for some people, they're saying, maybe when a child is like 14 or 13, you go there, or maybe like 15, they now say, oh, we've seen you once or twice, and that's the end. You know, so really and truly, there are those essence things that are being missed, which is causing a problem for later on. And also, what we're talking about the proof, for example, for some schools, in what we've heard from parents too, is actually for some, even though we should really have no exclusion at the end of the day, there should be support in schools. But when they go to the proof, for example, they get more support. Everything is in there. So for some children, yes, it's better for them. I mean, they get the support in there, but really and truly, it should have happened from the schools together. So for some schools, so they would maybe, they're like, parents are saying, you know what, they just exclude so that they know that they will go over there and, you know, you have the mental health, you have the CAPS, you have everything in place for that child. So just looking at, and it's still the same as we said earlier on, integrated approach, no joined up service together. Because if you have early intervention and family help, like things that we already have in place in Newham, which is good. So when the triggers are coming, for example, where is it going? When the school is finding a child is having difficulty, where are they sending that child to? Almost like the NHS system, you have a real platform or something where you have everything just joined up. So it really boils down to that thing. And earlier on, you talk about another thing about the culture, the us and them culture. For having co-production in its true sense, how are you going to engage? Is your voice being heard? You know, for example, how are parents being addressed? You say parent. The parent is an individual, they have a name, they have, you know, just little things like that, like that makes people stray away from not coming there. So parents are really saying that for us and even the children themselves. So for some, like I said, the proof is helped some people come ahead. So that's a good one for some. But why should you have to get to that point? Is what we're saying. Schools should have more support to be able to help the children.
Okay, thanks very much. That's great. Should we go into the last one, because we've got about just under 5 minutes or so. I perhaps should have been a bit more chairman-like and chairperson-like. Right, so the last one is funding and provision. Okay, lovely. Okay, so very briefly, that's it. Okay, so there's the equity of offer, the high needs budget overspend, and as I think most people know, there is a working group going on that. So, and we're hoping in the autumn when we'll be discussing this topic, that's going to be, I've done a lot of work on that. The impacts of the historic policy of non-mainstream provision, which does come up a lot. Effectiveness of provision, national formula, which every authority, of course, is subject to, the history and also the current impact, because it does change, I think, yearly. The banding and overall impacts on provision, including out of borough and resources. So there's a whole group of those there. Just perhaps throw it open. It's almost 3:30. So can I just say if there's 1 or 2 points, and if people want to send in points beyond now, then we can do that. I don't want to kind of go beyond the 3:30, as you've kindly given up an hour and a half already. Martin.
Yeah, I wonder if there needs to be, we could all spend this hour and a half and several more talking about what the problems are with funding SEND provision. I wonder if there needs to be some way of trying to characterise what we actually think works, what we actually think. You mentioned cost effectiveness at right at the top of the terms of reference, and we need to sort of try and develop some kind of common understanding of that, of what it actually all means and how it, because so much of it is driven by certain other things happening. And I just think if we could actually find a way of thinking about what does this look like, what does a model that works look like, it would be a great place to be. I'm not saying we'll be in a position to pay for it, that's another question, but I've said this in a group previously, that whatever the cost, it would be useful for us to actually have a sense of what that should look like, what that could look like. And I think it'd be a really good output from the Commission to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Martin. Kirsty, you've got your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the circles felt very like the funding that we distribute to schools and settings, and I'm just wondering whether the Commission's actually going to look at, like Sarah's point earlier about speech and language. That's a pot of money that we commission. We've got the Senate fund that we use to commission, and we've got, you know, different teams that are paid to deliver services for Senate. I'm just wondering whether this is wider than just the funding we distribute to schools and settings, and it's actually more about our structural use of our central funding, and are we going to go there with that? Because I think some of what you'd referenced maybe in other circles are linked to the fact that we maybe don't have joint commissioning strategies in certain places, and we commission funding in different places, and we commission a service to do one thing and then another. So I see it as broader than just what we pay schools and settings. It's actually a bit more structural stuff across the CCG and the LA. Yeah. And I'm wondering if we should include that in there.
Okay. Can I make Jim? And should we make Jim? I think perhaps would be the last one, and I'll just comment on that after hearing Jim as well.
Sorry. It's also about the transparency of how funding decisions are made at local authority level, and also how it links back to what is within a draft plan, because sometimes the two don't marry up. The expectations on what is to be delivered don't marry in reality with the funding that is supposedly tied into it.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks for that, for those points. I mean, I think, as you can see, as you've seen all of them, a lot of them are quite specific, because these are things that have come up in conversations. But what people are doing here is kind of making these linkages and saying, yes, that's okay, but it's actually about commissioning and so on. So thanks for that. We'll have made a load of notes about that. So I think I ought to draw this to a close. Steph, did you want to talk about just briefly and point out to the list of meetings that we're looking at?
I'll just say very quickly that we have a forward plan based on those themes and structuring the different engagement events that we've discussed. So I think I can update that and send that out based on our discussions today of other creative ways that we wanted to engage with different stakeholder groups. But yeah, that sets out essentially our plan till October in terms of meetings, so that everyone can see when those dates are. Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Well, can I thank everyone for not just attending, but also contributing and joining in, and just just stress this point that I do hope that people will talk to colleagues and other parents and so on to kind of get greater and greater engagement, and that will develop over this period. And some of the ways that we're talking about acting will go. There'll be a lot of it is beyond this meeting. It is about doing things in schools in early years, etc., etc. Yamu, you wanted to say something. Did you just finish?
Just a quick one. We were talking about participation and engagement. Could we just make sure the meetings are more parent friendly, because 2:30 to 2:00 is a very inconvenient time. I had to miss a lot of the meeting because I was going in and out looking after my daughter. So for future meetings, please. Thank you.
Okay, I think made a note of that. Good, fine. Okay, so again, can I thank everyone? And there'll be quite a few things happening between now and the next meeting. And I think everyone's had the copy of that, haven't they, Steph, of the plan? And other people may have other ideas. And if anyone wants to send in anything, already I'm getting things from the public who've heard, which is good. And so that they are being directed to me, and at the moment I'm responding fairly quickly. I see how many come in and see how well I cope with the numbers. But anyway, that's great. So thanks a lot, everybody. And as I say, I'm always open to people to contact me. Okay. Bye for now.